Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Today's discussion focuses on a circulating narrative regarding Iraq's financial position, specifically claims that the country's reserves are approaching critical levels, that dollar liquidity is drying up, and that the Central Bank of Iraq may be forced into drastic measures, such as drawing heavily on reserves, taking large loans, or even significantly increasing the value of the Iraqi dinar. These are serious claims, and they deserve a careful, fact-based, and balanced analysis, so that viewers can clearly understand what is realistic, what is speculative, and what it truly means for the Iraqi economy and the dinar. To begin, let's address the idea that Iraq's foreign reserves are reaching what has been described as a red line level. In financial terms, foreign currency reserves are one of the most critical indicators of a country's economic stability. These reserves, typically held in US dollars and other major currencies, are used to stabilize the exchange rate, finance imports, and maintain confidence in the national currency. Iraq, as an oil-dependent economy, builds these reserves largely through oil exports priced in US dollars. Historically, Iraq has maintained relatively strong reserves compared to many emerging markets, especially during periods of high oil prices. However, fluctuations in oil revenue, government spending pressures, and external financial obligations can place stress on these reserves. When officials or analysts refer to reserves approaching a red line, they are generally suggesting that reserves may be declining to a level that could limit the central bank's ability to defend the currency or manage liquidity effectively. That said, it is important to separate verified data from speculative commentary. As of the most recent credible economic reports, Iraq's reserves have not collapsed, nor have they reached a point of immediate crisis. There may be pressures, particularly due to fiscal spending and currency management challenges, but the idea of reserves being nearly exhausted is not supported by publicly available macroeconomic indicators. This distinction is critical because exaggerated claims about reserve depletion often lead to misunderstandings about what actions a central bank can or cannot take. Now let's examine the claim that there's no more dollar in Iraq. This statement likely refers to ongoing challenges related to dollar liquidity within the Iraqi financial system. Over the past couple of years, Iraq has faced stricter controls on dollar transactions, particularly due to international compliance requirements and oversight of cross-border financial flows. These measures have affected how dollars are accessed and distributed within the country, especially through the central bank's foreign currency auction system. However, a restriction in dollar access does not mean that dollars no longer exist in the system. Rather, it reflects tighter regulation, reduced leakage, and efforts to combat illicit financial activities. The impact of these measures has been felt in local markets, where exchange rate volatility between the official rate and the parallel market has occasionally widened. This creates the perception of a dollar shortage, but in reality, it is more accurate to describe it as a controlled and regulated flow of foreign currency, rather than a complete absence. The next part of the narrative suggests that the Central Bank of Iraq is being forced to tap into reserves or take on large loans to support the government. While central banks do play a role in supporting national financial stability, their primary function is not to finance government deficits directly. In Iraq's case, the central bank works alongside fiscal authorities, but it maintains a degree of independence in managing monetary policy. There are scenarios where a government may rely more heavily on reserves or external borrowing, particularly during budget shortfalls or periods of reduced revenue. Iraq has, in the past, utilized both domestic and international borrowing mechanisms. However, this is a standard practice in many economies and does not necessarily indicate an imminent financial breakdown. The key issue is sustainability. Whether the government can manage its spending, maintain revenue streams, and avoid excessive depletion of reserves over time. Now we come to perhaps the most significant claim in the narrative, that the solution to these challenges is to release the value of the currency, or in other words, to significantly increase the value of the Iraqi dinar. This is a common theme in online discussions about the dinar, but it requires careful examination. Currency valuation is not a tool that can be used arbitrarily to solve economic problems. In fact, revaluing a currency upward, making it stronger, can have complex and often unintended consequences. A stronger currency can reduce the cost of imports, but it can also make exports less competitive. For a country like Iraq, whose economy is heavily reliant on oil exports priced in dollars, a sudden and significant increase in the dinar's value would not necessarily provide the benefits that some narratives suggest. More importantly, central banks do not choose exchange rates in isolation from economic fundamentals. Exchange rates are influenced by a combination of factors including inflation, productivity, trade balances, fiscal policy, and investor confidence. For the Iraqi dinar to strengthen sustainably, it would require long-term structural improvements in the economy, diversification beyond oil, stronger institutions, and consistent monetary policy. The idea that the central bank has no choice but to raise the value of the currency is therefore misleading. In reality, central banks typically aim for stability rather than dramatic shifts. Sudden revaluations can create shocks in the economy, disrupt markets, and undermine confidence if not supported by underlying fundamentals. The narrative also references leadership within Iraq's financial institutions, suggesting that officials are under pressure or facing consequences for current conditions. While leadership decisions and policy direction do play a role in economic outcomes, it is important to avoid attributing complex macroeconomic challenges to individual actions alone. Iraq's economic situation is shaped by a wide range of factors including global oil prices, geopolitical dynamics, domestic political developments, and structural economic issues that have evolved over decades. In the short term, what does all of this mean for followers of the Iraqi dinar? The most immediate takeaway is that Iraq continues to face economic management challenges, particularly in balancing dollar liquidity, maintaining exchange rate stability, and managing fiscal pressures. These are real issues, but they are not unique to Iraq, nor do they automatically signal a dramatic shift in currency value. Short-term fluctuations in the exchange rate, especially in the parallel market, may continue as authorities adjust policies and respond to market conditions. Efforts to improve transparency, strengthen banking compliance, and stabilize the currency are ongoing, and these measures may take time to produce consistent results. In the long term, the outlook for the Iraqi dinar is closely tied to broader economic reforms. Key areas to watch include diversification of the economy beyond oil, improvements in governance and financial systems, investment in infrastructure, and integration into the global financial system. Progress in these areas can support a stronger and more stable currency over time, but this is a gradual process rather than an overnight change. It is also important for viewers to approach bold claims and dramatic narratives with caution. Statements suggesting that a currency will suddenly increase in value due to pressure, necessity, or internal decisions alone often overlook the complexity of global financial systems. Sustainable currency appreciation is typically the result of long-term economic strength, not short-term crisis responses. In conclusion, while the discussion around reserves, dollar liquidity, and monetary policy in Iraq highlights real economic considerations, the claim that the central bank has no choice but to significantly raise the value of the dinar is not supported by standard economic principles or current data. Iraq's financial authorities are more likely to continue focusing on stability, gradual reform, and maintaining confidence in the currency, rather than pursuing abrupt and potentially destabilizing changes. As always, staying informed through credible sources and maintaining a balanced perspective is essential when analyzing developments related to the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's economy. If you want to continue receiving responsible, factual, and up-to-date analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And remember, this content is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.